Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm ESL teacher Lisa. Today I'm going to give you several tips on how to speak English more like a native. One of the first things that you have to do is make sure you're really immersing yourself in the English language. Well, what do I mean? I mean surround yourself with the English language. You might be wondering, how do I do that if I don't live in an English-speaking country? Am I suggesting you move to the United States? Or move to Australia or the UK? No, not at all. You can artificially immerse yourself in the language, surround yourself with the language. You can start by daily conversations. But you might say, I have no one to speak with. Good. You're thinking, how do you get someone to speak with, to speak English with? Online. Go online with technology. We have companies like Cambly. I'll put the link in the description where you can talk to native speakers 24/7. There's other great online language companies out there. I think Cambly is great because they're all native and there's a lot of flexibility in booking lessons and selecting teachers. I think it's very student controlled, so I think you'll enjoy the platform. But also you can read English through newspapers. I did a video on Engoo.com. I think that's a great website where you can actually read news articles up to date that are designed for English language learners. And you can click and hear English. And so you can actually read along, follow along, and get the intonation and the pronunciation like a native. Also, you can watch videos, kids shows with subtitles and without the subtitles. And maybe you didn't think about this one, singing in English. Have you thought about that? We're going to discuss these and other tips in podcast form. So with the help of AI, I was able to extract some of the main points from this beautiful article that was recently written, giving you tips on how to immerse yourself in the language and speak more like a native. I do want to highlight, practicing speaking is key on a variety of topics. I often tell you through my past videos that I learned French. I spent 6 years. 6 years practicing French. I don't speak French though. Why? I didn't immerse myself in the language. After high school, I didn't practice. Even during high school, I started in 7th grade to 12th grade, so 6 years of learning. And I didn't have enough speaking practice in class. And that's a problem with traditional language learning in schools. I'm sure you've had that issues. I have many students that complain they've never gotten enough English speaking practice. So you can do it artificially with technology by doing things daily. You don't need to spend an hour a day, even 5 minutes consistently doing something in the language. Immersing yourself in the language is important. And I can't overemphasize reading in English. That is super, super important. So you can be very fluent in the language. You can get to an advanced level. In our case, English, you can get to an advanced English level without even stepping foot in the United States. And you do it by immersion. Well, what goes into immersing yourself in a language and what are some other tips to help you speak like a native? Let's listen to the podcast.
Okay, so are you ready to really dive deep today?
Always.
This is exciting stuff. We're talking about how to speak English like you were born speaking English.
Right.
Which is, I think, a goal of a lot of our listeners out there.
Yeah, definitely.
We found this super interesting article, and it's called 10 Tips to Speak English Like a Native Speaker.
Mm-hmm.
It was published just a few days ago, actually, on December 21st of this year.
Oh, wow. So it's pretty recent.
It's hot off the presses, and yeah, it's got a ton of cool stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to kind of dig into it with you and really kind of see what we can glean from it.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things I really appreciate about this article is that it just kind of emphasizes doing rather than just knowing. You know, it's not just memorize all these grammar rules and you'll be fine. It's
right.
No, you got to immerse yourself. You got to use the language to really get it.
That's actually one of the first things they talk about is this whole idea of immersion, which is basically surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
Right.
And they kind of recommend some pretty simple stuff, things like switching your phone's language settings to English.
Oh, yeah.
Or even just like listening to English music while you work, or even just watching like a 5-minute news clip in the morning.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, especially if you do it every single day.
You're right.
Like you said, just 5 minutes even,
Yeah, 5 minutes.
can make a big difference.
And where do you recommend they go for that?
I think BBC News is really good.
Okay.
CNN is also good. Their anchors speak very clearly, and they speak at a good pace.
Right. Not too fast, not too slow.
Exactly.
That's key.
Yeah.
You know what I've been doing recently, and I found this is really helpful, is using those apps that like transcribe the audio as it's going so you can like follow along with the text.
That's really helpful.
It's really helpful for catching those words that you might miss.
Right.
Otherwise.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of catching things, the article talks about this like really cool trick, which is like singing along to English songs.
Yes.
Which sounds a little bit silly.
It does, but it totally works.
But why does it work?
Well, when you're singing, you're naturally like picking up on the rhythm,
Oh.
the intonation, stress patterns of the language.
That's so true.
You're basically like training your vocal muscles to produce those sounds without even realizing it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, one thing that I always feel like is a mountain for me is vocabulary.
Yeah.
Like how do you actually build up your vocabulary? Because the article talks about using like mobile dictionaries and building word lists, but honestly, that can get so overwhelming so quickly.
Yeah, I think the key is to focus on phrases instead of just isolated words.
Okay.
It's kind of like you're learning these prefabricated building blocks for sentences.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so instead of just memorizing the word meet, learn the phrase like catch up with someone or run into a friend. So you're not just learning the word, you're learning how to use it in a natural way.
Right. It's like learning the chunks of language that native speakers actually use.
Exactly.
And speaking of things that native speakers use all the time, phrasal verbs.
Oh, yes.
Those are tricky.
Tricky, tricky, tricky.
It's so important.
Why are they so important?
Well, they're everywhere, and they really add like color and nuance to your speech.
Right.
But they can be tricky to master.
They are.
Like you said. So my advice would be to start with some common ones.
Okay.
And just try to use them in real conversations as much as you can.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Like instead of saying, I admire my teacher, you could say, I look up to my teacher.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So you're using the phrasal verb look up to.
I'm definitely going to try that.
Yeah.
It's funny because the article actually really emphasizes talking with native speakers as much as possible.
Yeah.
And they recommend things like finding language exchange partners or joining like online discussion groups.
What do you think about that?
I think it's crucial, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, because there's really no substitute for real-time feedback.
Right.
When you interact with native speakers, you hear how they use the language in context. And they can correct your pronunciation or your grammar in a natural way.
Yeah.
Plus, it's just a lot more fun than studying alone. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it.
Do you have any recommendations for like platforms or places where people could do that?
I think Hello Talk is a good one.
Okay.
Tandem is another one. There's tons of them out there.
So basically, if we're trying to tie all this together, immerse yourself in the language.
Right.
Practice pronunciation.
Yes.
Maybe through fun things like singing. Focus on learning phrases instead of just words.
Yes.
And get out there and talk with native speakers as much as you can.
Exactly.
It's a multifaceted approach.
Yeah.
But it's so rewarding.
Yeah, definitely.
It's such a cool goal to have,
Yeah.
to be able to speak another language fluently.
It really is.
So I'm curious, for all of you listening out there, think about a time when you had to speak English in like a high-pressure situation, maybe a job interview or a presentation.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges that you faced? And now imagine applying these tips. Do you think it would have made a difference?
I think it would have.
I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely.
Let us know.
Yeah, let us know.
Until next time, happy English learning.